Hey guys, it's Jess from Blooming Solitude. Today's video is just going to be taking you through how I create my clip art sets from traditional art. I have just finished this collection called Witchy Wonders. It's done in watercolors, markers and pencils. And so all I'm going to do is scan it in and show you how I cut it out in Photoshop. I'll be using the Epson scan software that comes with the scanner. So the settings that you have might be different, but I like to pretty much leave all the settings as they are, and I change. Normally it's set to 300 dpi, but because we're scanning clip art that is going to be used for all different projects, I like to scan it in at 600 dpi. This allows the image to be twice the size of what it is that we've scanned, and that's pretty much it. So I just change it to 300 to 600 dpi and then I hit scan and then I name it and then I save it. I'm just going to save it to the desktop for this time being, and it's going to be as a JPEG, and just hit OK. So now that it's scanned, it'll bring up the image that it's scanned, and we can just scroll in and double check that there's no blurry parts of the illustration of the scan, because sometimes, especially along the binder of the book, it can be quite blurry where the scan hasn't got all the image properly. So I'm just going to go through and just check that it's at the standard that I like. So the next step is to bring this into Photoshop, and we will start cutting out the first illustration. Okay, so I've got it open in Adobe Photoshop now, and what I usually like to do is play around with the colors and do any adjustments that I need to do before I start cutting it out. You can do it the other way around, but the only thing is, if you do it individually, you'll have to click on each one, go to adjustments and fix the adjustments. But if you do it as at the beginning, it'll change everything at the same time. You will have some uniform with the way the colors all look. Okay, so I'm going to crop it just so I can get rid of this space on the side. You don't have to do this, but I just prefer to get rid of any unnecessary elements. And so you're just left with the main page, and I'm just going to go to image, adjust, and maybe hue and saturation. Sometimes I can't achieve what I want it to look like in watercolors in traditional art, so then I'll come in and add some adjustments to it after to make it brighter or more vibrant. I quite like the colors that is in it, but I'm just going to play around and just see what I can come up with. Might brighten it just a little or darken it. So I'm just going to go through and just make some changes. I'm going to speed this part up because sometimes it can take a while. Okay, so I made some changes. You probably can't really tell too much, but just some fine tuning in the colors to make it more what I want it to be. So the next step I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over with my brush tool and just add some extra little elements like color dodge and stuff like that, just to add a little bit of vibrancy. I'm going to put it to really low opacity. So basically all I want to do is just add a little bit of highlighting to the artwork. It's very subtle, nothing too crazy, but it just adds a little bit of magic to the items and just a bit of glow. I really like the way it looks. happy with that. Later I will also go through, once it is all cut out, I'll then select individual ones just to change colours slightly. I don't need to apply it to all, just one or two. So these two feathers, I kind of want to differentiate it a bit. So this one here, once it's all cut out, I will change the colour of that slightly, just so it's not too similar to this one. And I think that's the only really thing that I'll change. Maybe the potion or this one to differentiate these two colours. But again, it'll only be very subtle changes, nothing too crazy. And I think we're ready to start cutting it out. So I'm just going to select the top layer and go to the first image, which is this hat. And I'm going to grab the pen tool just by tapping P. And basically I'm going to cut this entire thing out using the pen tool. There is so many different methods you can use to cut out images in Photoshop, but I found as slow and tedious as this method is, it gives me the best results that I want. I found some of the other methods leave little bits of pixels behind, or they don't get exactly against the edge, especially if you have come outside the lines like I have. Using the pen tool, you can eliminate all of that stuff. So I'm just going to start at the very top. I like to zoom quite far in, and then put the first anchor point down and then click up here and drag. And sometimes it takes me several tries to get the right angle. And then I alt click on this node here to get rid of this end. And then I do another click and drag until I get the right angle. And then same process. So alt click in the center and then choose another one. And then I'm just dragging to get the right curve that I want. Basically, that is all that I do. It can be really tedious, especially if you have a really large and detailed object. But I really do think it is worth the extra effort. So I'm just going to speed this up now because it's going to take quite a while, and I'll see you on the other side. So now we've come to the last point here, and to connect this to the starting point, we just hover over and it will come up with a tiny little circle. That means that is your starting point, and when you click that, it's going to join the whole path as a complete path. So if I click that and drag as I have been doing and then let go, it then completes the path. So now we have gone around this whole hat and we have cut out all the edges that we don't want, and we've just gone around the outside. So if we right click anywhere on the inside of this path and select make selection, we then have a little pop-up box. So I normally just leave it on 0 because I want it exactly where I've put it. Otherwise, if you want to feather it to make it a little softer edge, you can add 1 or 2 pixels, but I like to leave it on 0. And then I say OK, and then it gives you little dancing ants around your selection. All I do now is Control C to copy and Control V to paste. And so now we've got our new hat, or our cutout hat, on a brand new layer. So I'll just rename this hat, And what I like to do is add a new layer under everything and make this white. And now we can see the edges that we had. So sometimes we get little sharp edges like this. So I just go in, I have a stylus that I use, or I use my Wacom with the stylus. You can also do this with a mouse, but it's much easier if you have like a pen. And then I just go through and just neaten up those edges with an eraser tool. You don't have to do this. And I just hit R to rotate and E for eraser. But I'm really finicky with my edges, so I like them to be nice and rounded. I don't like any sharp edges. So I just go around, might take the opacity off. I basically just go around the rest of the cutout and just check for any sharp edges. Edges like this are okay. It's more the uneven edges that I've created. And I might just straighten this up a little. Now, using the pen tool can be really tricky, and it is hard to get a nice curve. And it is definitely something that just comes with time and practice. But the best thing is you can always come through like we're doing now and just erase any bits that didn't quite go to plan. So here's a sharp edge. So just going to round these out. And I'm just holding space and dragging as I go to move around the page. So a corner like this, I like to just gently round out so it's not too sharp. And it's good to use more of a softer brush for this purpose. It's just easier to erase or gently erase an edge when the brush is soft. Not too soft, but just soft enough so it doesn't create that really hard line. And I think that's it. So I'm just going to shift R back to normal. And that's our clip art illustration. So now we can move this around. This is a complete illustration ready to put into our collection. And I'll go ahead now and do all of the others, and I'll speed that process up and I'll come back at the end. Okay, so we've cut them all out and we've cleaned up all the fine sharp edges and stuff, and so I'm pretty happy with how it looks. I have gone over each illustration and just slightly adjusted the colors a little bit more, but overall I'm really happy with how it's looking. I like to check my illustrations against a black background or a very dark background because they look really good on the white like this, but when you add a dark background, which I'll just add one now, sometimes you can see the light edges here. There's another example here which doesn't show up on the light backgrounds, and because I make this clip art to sell online, I like to make sure that each illustration works well on both light and dark backgrounds. And it's just a little pet peeve of mine if there's any little white bits left over. So it's actually pretty good. There's not too many. Normally there's a lot more whiteness in the edges, but there's only a really tiny amount. So what I will do, I'll grab an illustration. So this top hat, I will add an alpha lock function on it, and then I'll grab my brush tool with a like the edge color selected, and then I will just run my pen tool along the edge of the artwork, and then this way it kind of helps to eliminate any of the white that was peeking through. Let me turn my opacity up. And it kind of helps to define the edge a bit more as well. Oops, that's a bit too much. Only need it on the very, very edge. And so now if I turn that dark layer off, I can double check it against the light layer, and I think that looks amazing. I'm really happy with that. So now I'm going to go through each one and just do that process, and then that'll be it for the editing and color adjustments and stuff. So I'm going to speed this up and then I'll be back in a minute. Okay, so I've gone around all the edges and cleaned them up and darkened them a bit. So if I go back, if I turn my dark layer off, you'll see that they still have a really nice outline, and they stand off the page really nice. And then when we turn the dark one back on, there's no like little loose speckled bits and stuff, which is what I like. So now these illustrations are ready to save as a PNG. All the background is removed and each file will be saved individually. So to do that, if you just highlight all the illustrations, not the backup or the bottom layers, only the little illustrations, and then right click on the layers panel and select, you can do either quick export as PNG, which puts them in a file instantly, but if you want to change any settings, you go export as, which is what I normally do. And then that will open up a window. So on the left hand side here we have all the illustrations that we've just selected from this section. What you'll notice is this first one doesn't have a background. It's got the checkerboard background, or that means there's no background. But if we click on the next one down, it's got a white box around it. So if we had only selected on this one, even though everything is ticked, and then we exported, all of the illustrations except for this top one will have a white background. I don't know why this happens, but we need to highlight all of the illustrations on this side, and then we select PNG from the format box, and then Photoshop will go through and change each one to PNG, which means it'll have a transparent background. And so now we can see that each single one doesn't have any white bounding box. So now we can proceed with what we're doing. So we're going to choose PNG, make sure transparency is checked. Everything else is fine. I leave it as it is. I select copyright and contact info, and then I hit export. And then I choose my file type, which I've already got it here, Witchy Wonders CLIPART collection, and then I hit select folder. All of these illustrations will be saved in that folder. So now if I bring up the folder, Witchy Wonders CLIPART collection, we have all of our illustrations here. And if we double click on one, we will see that it has no background. And we can click through each one and it's all transparent, which is exactly what we want. And so now you can use these in whatever project you like. Make seamless patterns or invitations. You can make almost anything with clip art sets. So what I do from here is I create my thumbnail for my product listing, and then I save these as a zip folder and I upload them to my online shops. I hope you found that useful, and if you have any questions, please let me know. I am happy to answer anything that you have. I hope you have a lovely day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!